You're a small game studio in 2007. You left high-paying jobs and risked your family to pursue this dream. But the success you had was coming to an end. A dark force was drastically changing the world you live in. Without stable income, you look to Sony, who's looking to fund the next big studio. So you go big and pitch an open-world superhero game. But a rival studio 7 times bigger than you was working on an identical game, racing to launch. This is your one shot to prove your next game has what it takes to save your studio, to prove to the world you aren't a one-trick pony, and to cement your legacy. This is the miraculous story of Sucker Punch Productions.
You always felt like you were a couple mistakes away from being dead.
Sucker Punch, incredible developer.
It's not good enough.
The weight of the 100 families that depend on us being in business, this isn't working.
We're not here to make B+ games, we're here to make games of the year.
To understand how desperate this moment was, we need to go back to 1997. Chris Zimmerman and Brian Fleming were living the dream, secure jobs at Microsoft with good salaries, but the only thing they lacked was creative freedom. So Chris, Brian, and a group of friends left their stable jobs to start a game studio, Sucker Punch Productions. But you see, there was something crucial they didn't understand about the game industry at the time, and Sucker Punch learned it the hard way. They spent 70% of their own money developing their first game, Rocket, Robot on Wheels, before attempting to find a publisher. See, publishers are everything. They fund your game, market it, and get it into stores. But despite their backwards approach, they put on a suit, packed up their game, and went to pitch it to 3 big dogs in the industry. Sony initially liked the concept, but Sucker Punch wanted to launch on the N64, then port it to PlayStation. Sony declined since they wanted exclusivity. Their next stop was THQ. Now, this deal was 90% complete, but for some reason it fell through. Their last hope was EA. But EA offered them a deal to build a new game and ditch Rocket. With so much money already invested into Rocket, Sucker Punch declined. With their spirits worn, money burnt, and their dream on the line, they showed up at E3 '99 with a smile on their face, belief in their work, and hope for a miracle. Rocket was showcased, and the fans loved it. So Ubisoft came in and published it. Rocket didn't sell much, but it proved they could make games. Now, this wasn't a win at all. Sucker Punch was still in financial trouble, and they needed their next game to actually make money so they could keep the lights on. So they pitched their new concept early to Sony. A raccoon with a mask, but he's a thief. But wait, we can't promote stealing to kids, so he has a moral code. He can only steal from other thieves. Since everyone's doing 3D, we'll do cel-shaded animation for a unique look. And we had success with our last game, Rocket, so we have experience. We'll also make this a PlayStation exclusive like Spyro and Jack. Sony greenlit the project, and Sly Cooper nearly hit 1 million copies sold and became a breakout hit. Sony was impressed, so they greenlit the Sly franchise. Sly 2, Band of Thieves in 2004, Sly 3, Honor Among Thieves a year later. By the trilogy's end, they sold nearly 3 million copies. But by 2005, Sucker Punch could feel their success wasn't going to last forever.
We were looking for something different, our version of Gotham.
It's boring.
The PlayStation 3 is shipping, we gotta be ready.
But when the time comes,
We had to get this right.
Sucker Punch's future relied on how they'd attack this forefront war that could destroy everything they'd built. The first blow came from the market itself. The gaming world that made Sly Cooper a hit was disappearing. Games like Grand Theft Auto and God of War were dark, mature, cinematic experiences that made cartoon platformers feel childish. PlayStation's first-party studios were also moving on. Naughty Dog dropped Jak and Daxter, and Insomniac ditched Spyro. The Batman Begins era was officially influencing the entire world. The second blow was watching other studios capture Sony's attention and resources. Naughty Dog was developing Uncharted, Insomniac was working on Resistance. If Sucker Punch wanted that first-party title, they'd have to change. The third blow was technical reality. Their $1 million engine was built for the PS2, and they'd have to rebuild it for the PS3 with its nightmare architecture. Zimmerman even admitted that they wildly underestimated the transition. But the final gut punch was the cruelest of all. They'd later discover that Radical Entertainment, a massive studio with 400 people, was building the exact same game Sucker Punch was about to build to save their legacy. Same concept, same genre, same target audience. This was truly their last shot. Fail now and they'd lose everything they'd spent a decade building. So what do you do when you're facing impossible odds? You make an impossible promise. The impossible promise made to Sony was codenamed Project True Hero, a Sims-like game where players could build pet shops and tiki bars while having superpowers. It was so vague that even Sucker Punch later admitted it didn't exactly enlighten people. This was the idea that was supposed to save the studio. Meanwhile, Radical's 400-person army was making steady progress on their own superhero game. They described it as the most dynamic video game character ever imagined. Sucker Punch spent months prototyping elements during the first year, but they ended up with a bunch of things that had nothing to do with each other. When they finally got focus groups to test it, the reaction was brutal. It was a complete train wreck, according to Sucker Punch. To add to the fire, their game engine had to be rebuilt to work on the PS3. So for the first 10 months, 3D art, textures, and graphics were made with no clue if they'd even work on the PS3. The clock was ticking and their rival was getting even closer to the finish line. But that's when something clicked. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was finally understanding what they'd learned from Sly Cooper. But the original Sims-like concept was scrapped, and the game pivoted to become a superhero origin story called Infamous, inspired by Batman comics. Suddenly, everything made sense. Cole McGrath was born, a bike messenger caught in an explosion that gave him powers but destroyed his city. Every choice he makes shapes his abilities and his soul: save civilians or ignore them, show mercy or seek revenge, become the hero the city needs or the villain it fears. The game finally had an identity, but they'd burned nearly 2 years getting here, and the technical nightmare of PlayStation 3's development was just beginning. Simple things that worked fine in Sly Cooper became impossible for Infamous. They needed a realistic city with proper lighting and shadows. They needed Cole's electrical effects to look convincing while having stable frame rates. Even when they were close to finishing, they realized they built the entire game to run on the slowest part of the PS3's processor, so they had to rewrite everything. They were constantly rewriting core systems multiple times. Meanwhile, Radical Entertainment was getting closer to their finish line with each passing day. As Sucker Punch finally found their footing, they were about to discover they weren't alone in this fight. See, you and I knew about Radical and Sucker Punch, but they didn't know about each other. Word started spreading through the industry. Screenshots leaked, trailers dropped, and that's when the devastating truth emerged. Sucker Punch spent 2 years struggling to create their superhero game, finally found their vision, and then discover a studio with 400 people have been building essentially the same thing: an open-world city with a superpowered protagonist, destructible environments, and urban chaos. Radical even admitted they were a little worried. But if Radical was worried with their massive team and resources, imagine how Sucker Punch felt with only 60 devs. Journalists began writing comparisons before either game was even finished. Sucker Punch's one shot at survival had become a winner-take-all duel, and they were about to discover that both games were targeting the exact same launch window. The race was on, and only one could claim to be the definitive superhero experience of 2009.
My name is Alex Mercer.
I really don't care. Let's get this over with, shall we? Bring it on.
Infamous launches on May 26, 2009. Prototype launches 2 weeks later on June 9th. Sony executives were watching from headquarters, other PlayStation studios were watching, the gaming press was watching, and somewhere in Seattle, 60 Sucker Punch developers and their families held their breath. The comparison started immediately. Cole McGrath was a hero learning to control his powers. Alex Mercer was a shape-shifting anti-hero with no moral limits. Infamous had precise electricity-based abilities. Prototype used brutal, over-the-top carnage. Infamous has a comic book morality system versus Prototype's conspiracy thriller. Infamous's living city that reacted to your choices versus Prototype's playground of destruction. The gaming community was split. Prototype felt like playing as the Hulk in Manhattan, which was great. But Infamous had something else: heart, polish, and a truly unique atmosphere. When the dust settled, the people had spoken. The reviews for Infamous praised its storytelling, its moral complexity, and its technical polish. Infamous sold around 300,000 copies in its first month. Now, Prototype did sell nearly 600,000 in the first month thanks to its multi-platform release, but Infamous earned something more valuable: respect. But Sony executives were about to offer them something even better than validation. Infamous's success had created something Sucker Punch never expected. Scott Rode, a Sony executive, later admitted that other groups were interested in Sucker Punch, so they had to move quick. For the first time in their history, Sucker Punch had options. They could leave Sony to chase bigger budgets, multi-platform deals, and more resources. But Sony was the company that trusted your idea for a thieving raccoon, trusted your initial vision for a Sims-like superhero game. Would Sucker Punch find that kind of trust anywhere else? After 2 years of negotiations, Sony made the call that could change everything. In August 2011, Sony acquired Sucker Punch Productions, making them an official first-party studio within PlayStation's family. They went on to make Infamous 2, cementing their reputation as masters of superhero gaming. Then Infamous Second Son, showcasing the PlayStation 4's power. And then Sony gave them the keys to build something even bigger. But what if this never happened? What if they took that EA deal and ditched Rocky? Sly would never be here, Infamous erased. A single bet on themselves, their philosophy, and more importantly, Fleming's North Star, his 80-year-old man test. The idea that when they're retired and looking back, it's more meaningful to have made great games than to have simply chased whatever might sell the most units. The biggest victories come from refusing to play it safe, trusting your creative instinct, and betting everything on yourself and your abilities. Sucker Punch took that bet and won.